So the very first session will be about the course introduction. And instead of directly going to the course contents and the course learning objectives, I will start with highlighting some of the problems related to the area of structural dynamics. So I will just introduce few problems or few issues which require an information and knowledge about structural dynamics, and then we will be able to understand why we need this course, what is its importance and significance. So I'll start with a very classic example of structural failure of Tacoma Narrows Bridge. It was a suspension bridge which was built in 1940s, and it was designed by one of the leading experts in suspension bridges at that time. Several loading, for example, dead load, traffic load, wind-induced drag load, they were considered in the structural design of this bridge. However, the bridge collapsed during a windstorm in which the wind velocity was much lower than the maximum wind speed used in the design. It was collapsed right after its inauguration, and it was collapsed in a windstorm which was having a wind speed significantly less than what was used for the design of this bridge. If you look at the pictures and videos available from that classical failure example of Tacoma Narrows Bridge, you will see that the bridge deck was oscillating in a torsional manner. For example, here you can see. In fact, I have a video for that, so let's quickly watch that video where Tacoma Narrows Bridge right after its inauguration was. Here you can see the oscillation of the bridge deck, and you can imagine the level of movement and motions involved in this windstorm which caused ultimately the failure of this bridge. You can see here in that particular windstorm, the bridge kept on oscillating for hours until it finally collapsed. You can see here there is a lateral wind force and the bridge is oscillating because of that, and finally it get collapsed. You can see here many of the spans, they just completely fell down. So this was a classical example of structural failure in 1940s.
Dawn of a fatal day, and the wind begins to speak with a roar that no man can fail to hear. In a 40-mile-an-hour gale, the center span weaves like a ribbon in a swinging twist that you wouldn't believe possible unless you could see it as you do now. There's an automobile caught on the heaving roadway. The 11,000-ton center span twists and strains the giant cables that support it. Cables of 6,300 wire strands, each 17 inches thick. Back out of the danger zone, all stricken spectators are driven to safety as the bridge gyrates like a nightmare high above the river, twisting, turning, curling. The lone motorist is forced to abandon the car. He has but a few minutes in which to save himself. Face to face with fate, his destiny hanging in the balance. Will he heed the last warning or perish with the doomed structure? but he saved himself by seconds. No structure of steel and concrete can stand such a strain. Steel girders buckle and giant cables snap like puny threads. There it goes! Engineers are divided as to the cause of the disaster. Some claim it was the use of solid girders. Others differ. But whatever the reason, Tacoma will rebuild. This time a bridge that will not provide a super thrill in the news.
Now, if we analyze the concept involved in the design of that particular bridge, that bridge was designed based on static concept. Uh, the dynamic effects were not considered in the design, which means that the wind loading which was applied for the purpose of structural analysis and design was idealized as a static force. So the lateral wind force was assumed as a static force. The dynamic effect of that wind force, which means the fluctuation in its time, that was not considered in the design of this bridge. From several videos and pictures available from the collapse, because it took hours to actually uh, collapse and fell down those few spans in that bridge, we found that the bridge collapsed by a certain unstable dynamic excitation mechanism. It kept on moving in a torsional manner, that bridge deck, and then finally it collapsed. Now we know that that unstable dynamic excitation mechanism is called torsional flutter. Torsional flutter is one dynamic effect of wind loading, and when I say dynamic effect, I mean an effect which is varying with time. So whenever I say any dynamic effect, it means any effect which varies with time, which is not constant in time. So torsional flutter is one effect, one dynamic effect of wind loading, and we later was able to understand that effect, and then later was able to identify the true cause of the failure of Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Actually, in this particular effect, the amplitude of vibration in torsional oscillation, it started with a very low value, a very low amplitude, and the motion slowly grew up until the suspended rope broke by fatigue, and then the bridge collapsed. So if we look at the bridge deck in its section, it just moved in an torsional manner like this and then like this, and it kept on oscillating in this manner such that the suspended ropes, they just failed in fatigue, and finally the bridge collapsed. In few hours the bridge finally collapsed. After this bridge, many studies on bridge dynamics were conducted, and every bridge engineer since then have to now understand the theory of structural dynamics who is involved in the design of long span bridges. So this example tells us that how important it is to understand the dynamic effects of different loadings and how wrong it can be to just assume them as static forces. So wind force, when assumed as a lateral static force, that concept actually missed some important dynamic effects of the actual dynamic wind loading. One of them was torsional flutter. A movement in the torsional direction, torsional movement, a very small amplitude, but it keep on adding or growing up with time until the structure finally collapses. This is a simulation, a computational fluid dynamics simulation where you are seeing currently the bridge deck. So this is a bridge deck, And this is the motion of wind, and this is the bridge deck. So I'll show you now a simulation which will show you how actually this failure of Tacoma Narrows Bridge occurred because of a phenomena called torsional flutter. When I apply the wind force or the fluid force here in this direction, first you will see that the bridge movement will be very small. But suddenly a point will come when the bridge movement itself will start interacting with the wind in the lateral direction. So let's see that simulation now. So you can see here that currently the wind is flowing and the bridge is vibrating with a very small amplitude. But then that small amplitude started growing with time, and then a time will come then the movement of bridge deck will start interacting with the actual wind which is being applied. So the angle of attack is constantly being varied when the bridge is moving in a very large displacement mode. So here you can see that bridge is vibrating up and down because of the lateral wind forces, but suddenly it started growing up that vibration, and then that vibration keep on increasing until you have a very significant torsional movement, and now the bridge movement start interacting with the wind itself. This phenomena is called torsional flutter. So please check again towards the end that now the movement is very large such that the angle of attack of wind is now constantly being varied, and therefore the movement is kept on increasing. This is just one phenomena out of several dynamic phenomena associated with the wind dynamic wind force. Currently, we know that there are several static effects and dynamic effects of wind loading. Static effects may include the deformation due to time averaged aerodynamic force, stresses due to wind induced pressure, and then there may be static instability caused by the static effect of wind load. But there are several dynamic effects also. At the failure of Tacoma Narrows Bridge, we might not know these dynamic effects, whether they exist or what are their actual behavior or phenomena. Out of those dynamic effects, there are several dynamic instability effects which may cause ultimate dynamic instability, the complete failure where the structure loses its own load carrying capacity. There is one structural failure, but there is one static or dynamic instability where the structure itself loses any load carrying capacity. So currently we know that torsional flutter is one of the dynamic instability which the structure may experience during the dynamic wind loading. But there are others also, for example, galloping or vortex excitation or some other phenomena associated with wind loading. So currently I may not be able to explain all of these dynamic effects, but I just want you to show you that the failure of Tacoma Narrows Bridge was caused by a phenomena which is associated with dynamic instability, which is a dynamic effect of wind loading, which was not considered in the design of that bridge. It was designed based on the static loading idea. So this example shows that how important it is to understand the true dynamics of a structure while designing it right at the design stage, so that we may avoid any dynamic effect later which may be experienced during the design life of our structure. Let's see another example, a hospital building subjected to an earthquake. In 1971, a very famous San Fernando earthquake occurred, and a hospital building, which was a multi-story reinforced concrete building, was severely damaged. This was the picture of that hospital, and there was a significant damage in the ground floor columns. Reinforced concrete columns were completely damaged, although the damage was less in the top floors, but Looking at the deformed or damaged configuration of the structure, we could easily guess that most of the displacements or deformations, they were concentrated at the first floor. So the whole building actually vibrated like a rigid mass shaking on very flexible columns. So whole of this mass was vibrating in a rigid mode, which is supported on these flexible columns. And these columns had to resist large cyclic shear force, and after a few cycles they were severely damaged. So that dynamic shear force which was experienced by these columns was proportional to the product of mass and acceleration of the building. If obviously this whole mass is m, and if it is accelerating with an acceleration a, you can calculate a force which is experienced by these supporting columns, and that will be obviously mass times acceleration. So in fact, whenever a structure, a multi-story building is subjected to a ground acceleration, an earthquake, what you can do is that you can multiply that ground acceleration with the mass of the structure to calculate a force which will have the same effect as the ground shaking when applied to the same structure. So if you apply the ground acceleration, or you fix the ground and then apply that force equal to mass times the ground acceleration, the effect of these forces and the effect of this ground shaking will be same. Mathematically, we will see in maybe next 1 or 2 lectures that these two scenarios are mathematically identical. That you shake a structure from base, or you fix the structure from base and apply a force equal to mass times that shaking ground acceleration. So it means that the ground acceleration can be simply multiplied with mass or can be scaled with mass of the structure to come up with effective earthquake forces, which are defined as the forces which when applied to the structure will produce same effects as the actual ground shaking. So this force on top is a hypothetical force which will cause same displacement or same effects in the structure as the actual ground acceleration. So it means that directly recording the ground acceleration for future earthquakes is relatively more convenient and easy to use for structural engineering applications, because we can directly record the ground acceleration and then multiply with the mass of the structure to convert that into force. And obviously, if the actual ground acceleration is the function of time and it is fluctuating in time, it is dynamic in nature, the resulting force also will be the function of time. So we are going to have a dynamic force which is being applied to our structure with fixed base. It will become the same scenario as we just apply the actual ground acceleration. Although we may convert, we may integrate this ground acceleration to get ground velocity. We may integrate it once again to get ground displacement. So there was a time when we were recording ground displacements actually for earthquakes. The earlier generation of seismographs, they were mainly composed of different ground displacement recordings. But nowadays, with strong ground motion accelerometers available, we directly record ground acceleration because it is more meaningful to us, because the mass of the structure is constant. So whatever fluctuation the ground acceleration has, the same fluctuation the actual effective earthquake force also will have when we multiply with the constant mass. So based on the same idea, this hospital building, let's continue that discussion about that. This is the hospital building after the famous San Fernando earthquake, and when we have a closer look at columns, we will see that the columns have significant failure. The rebars were exposed, they were buckled. There were shear failure in column, and the spirally reinforced concrete columns were deformed far beyond the requirements of the building code using which that hospital building was designed actually. So in many current seismic resistant design codes, a regular building like this one, the hospital building, may be designed by a static method. And the same idea where we can idealize the loading caused by a future earthquake as an equivalent static lateral force of a future earthquake. What we do is that we calculate an estimate of the future earthquake's equivalent static force, and then we apply it statically to our structure and try to design such that our cross sections are able to resist that lateral forces. Although in the later versions of building codes, these equivalent static forces, their calculation now involves some dynamic behavior or some dynamic characteristics of the building also. We will see that in the future, but still the idea primarily is based on the equivalent static force. That using some concept, you come up with those forces which will be produced by your future earthquake on your building and apply those future earthquake forces statically to your structure and design it. However, for seismic design of complex structures and for important structures, an explicit dynamic analysis may be required. We have identified in this specific hospital building case a very common defect which is called as the soft story mechanism or weak first story. I will explain that in next few slides also, but this is something which can be captured only using an explicit dynamic analysis. The traditional approaches of using equivalent static lateral force procedure for the purpose of seismic design may not work well for some of the buildings, especially complex buildings or high-rise buildings. Now we know that this earthquake phenomena have caused significant damage in several parts of the world. For example, this picture is from Wenchuan earthquake in China in 2008. It was a magnitude 7.9 earthquake and caused a death toll of greater than 70,000 people. This is from Kashmir 2005 earthquake. This picture was taken 1 month after Kashmir 2005 earthquake. It is in Balakot city. An earthquake having a magnitude 7.6 causing a death toll of more than 79,000. And this was the condition of different structural components for this specific house. This house was, this condition was after 1 month of the Kashmir 2005 earthquake. So you can imagine the level of destruction and the effort required to reconstruct all of those losses which may occur due to this earthquake phenomena. In some other parts of the world, for example, in Indonesia, in Yogyakarta, 2006, magnitude 6.2. Then the very famous 1995 Kobe earthquake in Japan. This is the earthquake after which several of the attempts started uh, for the earthquake resilient of built environment. So several of the earthquake initiatives in Japan started after this 1995 Kobe earthquake. It was a magnitude 6.9 earthquake with a death toll of 6,000. Let's see a quick clip of the 1995 Kobe earthquake. This was a video recording or footage from Kobe, Japan during this 1995 earthquake. This will give you an idea about the level of destruction and shaking which may be experienced by an earthquake of such magnitude. This is another video about the shake table testing of a multi-story reinforced concrete building subjected to the same Kobe earthquake. So what we do currently is that we construct full scale or reduced scale models of buildings, and we actually shake them with different past earthquakes and different dynamic shakings to try to understand what are some of the common defects which our structures may have, or try to understand some of the dynamic phenomena associated with earthquake shakings. So in this example, this multi-story reinforced concrete building was constructed, and then the Kobe earthquake was applied at its base. It is constructed on a shaking table, and then that table was uh, given with the Kobe earthquake shaking, and then the structural failure and all other things were observed during that shaking. So you can see here, so now the building is being shaken with different levels of earthquake, and this was the specific Kobe earthquake. And there are several sensors and video recorders and everything which is installed in that building to observe the structural failure. So you can see here, this is one column, and as a result of shaking you have seen its shear failure because of the same earthquake. This particular failure is caused by a very common defect in our structures, mostly in reinforced concrete structures, and that defect is called short column effect. When the confining wall, which is confining the columns on both sides, is not continued along the whole height of the column, there are significant shear stresses concentrated at the connection or at the intersection of wall and then the free end of the column. So that concentration of high shear stresses actually resulted in the shear failure of this column, and this phenomena itself is called short column effect. So this failure is because of that. Similarly, some other failures also were recorded and observed. So you can see these kinds of tests help us in actually understanding the dynamic effects and some of the basic uh, failures or basic defects which our structures may have, and we then try to improve our design philosophies and actions based on that. Starting from the same hospital example, the hospital which I showed earlier subjected to the San Fernando earthquake in 1971 had a very specific feature which many of our multi-story buildings even today also have. And that feature, as I have said earlier, is the weak first story. Generally, in multi-story buildings, we have several masonry infill walls. For example, these ones. All of these masonry walls, which are in the reinforced concrete frames, they stiffen all those frames on the top. But the very first floor, which is generally used for commercial purpose or parking purpose, it is open, and those masonry infill walls are not continued up to the ground level. Just like this one here, you can see the ground floor is being used for commercial application, but the top, all the other floors, they are completely packed with masonry infill walls. These masonry infill walls are generally considered as non-structural elements, but recent studies have shown that several of them, especially the one we construct here in our Southeast Asian context, the way we construct it, it behaves like a structural element. And because of that, the whole, all the top stories, they behave as a rigid mass which is supported on very flexible columns on the base. Sometimes in the front part of the building you don't have masonry walls, but in the opposite part you have. This causes torsional irregularity, plan irregularity in the building. So because of this weak first story, most of the failures caused by, or most of the deformations experienced during the ground shaking are concentrated at the ground floor only. All the other stories, they just act as one rigid mass. And I have more examples also. Here you can see one building where you have the masonry infill walls, which are just stuffed in the reinforced concrete frames, but they are not continued up to the bottom. So this bottom spans, they don't have masonry walls. So their lateral movement, if you can just simulate their lateral movements, you will see that most of the deformation is concentrated in the bottom floor. All the other three stories on top, they are just moving like a rigid mass, and the bottom floor is mostly having most of the deformation. You can safely say that around 80% of the total lateral deformation is concentrated in the bottom floor. And resultingly, the bottom floor columns will be experienced with highest shaking effects, and they will be highly damaged if the shaking forces or the shear forces exceeded their shear capacity. So here in 1999 Chichi earthquake in Taiwan, we have also seen similar kind of failure for many buildings. The first weak story completely collapsed. So this one which you are seeing is actually the second story. Here also, this is the second story. The ground floor is here, it is not even visible. This is second floor. The ground floor is not even visible. So this is the classical example where the first story collapsed completely because of this phenomenon. The same thing happened in the hospital case also, which I mentioned earlier in San Fernando earthquake. Even today we have buildings which have this defect. Now talking about earthquake phenomena, although I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just quickly have an overview of where actually on the world's map this earthquake occur. They don't occur everywhere. They occur only at certain locations. If you look at the past 100-year data, where each red dot is actually the location of the epicenter of an earthquake in last 100 years. So it is clearly visible that they occur only at certain places, and those places, some of you might have guessed already that they correspond to the boundaries between major tectonic plates, which actually constitute the crust of our earth. So if we talk about Southeast Asia and especially Pakistan, here you can see we are unfortunately lie on one of those lines where earthquake frequently occur. Australia, on the other hand, check that it is relatively free from most of the damaging earthquakes. Similarly, most part of Africa. Similarly, some countries in Europe also. But unfortunately, we are lying on one of the intersections of these tectonic plates. In fact, we lie on the intersection of three different tectonic plates, each moving in a different direction with a different speed, and they are in a state of slow collision. So therefore, we experience several major devastated earthquakes in last 100 years. This also emphasized the need for understanding structural dynamics while designing several of important structures in our local scenario also. These kinds of maps are called hazard maps, which give us an indication or idea about where we should expect the future earthquake and of what intensity. So all those areas which are in red color or orange color, there you may expect a high level of an earthquake in next few years or next 50 years, for example. And all those which have blue, dark blue or light blue, there you may have a less intensity of future earthquakes. These kind of maps are the output of a process called probabilistic seismic hazard assessment. It is a probabilistic science, just like the forecasting of weather. You know already that it is currently impossible to predict exactly how a particular uh, tectonic plate or how a particular part of the Earth's crust will behave in future. The composition of all these geological phenomena, their behavior and everything is not well understood currently. So therefore it is impossible to predict a future earthquake. If we were able to predict a future earthquake exactly, if we were able to predict the future shaking exactly, there was no need of this probabilistic science. But just like weather forecast, where we also cannot actually predict the exact weather for future, we also cannot exactly predict the next or future earthquake. So therefore we need probabilistic science. We take past data for many hundreds of years and we check the local geology and check the activity rates of different earthquake causing sources like faults and other phenomena. And then we finally come up with a forecast that this is likely the level of earthquake which may be experienced in future at that particular location. So this map is just like the weather forecast. It is just giving you an idea that this much level of earthquake you should experience at certain location. So this is not a earthquake prediction. It is a forecast. It is a forecast made on using past data, using the understanding of different seismic sources, their activity rates, how they are interacting. All those information is used and processed in a probabilistic framework to come up with uh, a realistic or relatively realistic estimate which can be used for the purpose of structural design in future. So these kind of maps called hazard maps, they are available for different countries and areas and different building codes, and then they are used as an input for the seismic design. But obviously they are based on some ground motion parameter, the peak value of a particular ground motion parameter. They are not based on the actual shaking cycles and the whole history of ground, how it will shake. For example, this particular earthquake hazard map is based on a ground motion parameter called peak ground acceleration, PGA. If we record the acceleration of a particular earthquake, ground acceleration for example, during a particular earthquake, as a function of time, we will get some graph, some shaking, some random shaking, and the peak value of that shaking obviously will be called as peak ground acceleration. So not only that we cannot actually predict the actual shaking, we can only forecast the peak number which is associated with a particular site. So each point on this map, the color is actually showing the level of peak ground acceleration classified under different zones. The level of peak ground acceleration which is expected in next 50 years, which is expected in future. So whenever a particular building will be designed against seismic loading, you need to know which color your particular site have in this map. So this will serve as an input for starting the seismic design process. The reason I showed you this map here is that most part of the country lies either in the high seismic zone or moderate seismic zone regions. So therefore, it is already evident that we need to understand the true dynamics of structures for the purpose of structural design in all of those moderate and high seismic zone areas. Let's change the discussion now to another phenomena, another loading which actually is dynamic in nature. We have very flexible structures nowadays, for example, marine observation towers, airport control towers, tall and slender buildings, and we may want to make these structures safe against winds and earthquake loading, which are dynamic in nature. But these cylinder structures or tower structures may vibrate because of these effects, which may cause human discomfort, motion sickness, and it may be difficult to perform the routine tasks in those observatory towers, for example, or high-rise buildings. Although they may be safe against wind and earthquake, but still the vibration may cause discomfort, a sense of fear among those occupants. These are called serviceability problems, that your structure itself is safe, it is well defined, but still because of unnecessary vibrations, it is very difficult to perform the intending function for that building. So this is called serviceability problem, that even under normal conditions, it is very difficult to use that building for the said purpose. Although this question actually belonged to a seismic design course, and this I will address in the next course. Actually, I will have a separate course on seismic analysis and design. In that, I will actually explain this whole process of probabilistic seismic hazard assessment, how we come up with this forecast for future earthquakes. Uh, Currently, if I can just summarize my answer in one or two lines, is that it all depends on the characteristics of those seismic sources which are available near your specific site. For example, there are some faults which have frequent earthquakes, maybe low magnitude frequent earthquakes. There are certain faults which may rupture after a very long time, but they may have a very large magnitude or moderate magnitude earthquake. So it all depends on the characteristics of those faults or those seismic sources which govern the seismicity of a particular area. So therefore, when you say why we don't have frequent earthquake, the reason actually would be the characteristic of those controlling faults in which lie at a particular location. The seismicity of the western part of Pakistan is mostly governed by three or four major faults, including Chaman Fault, Ornach Knoll Fault, and Allahabad Fault, for example. All of these faults, they have a particular recurrence rates, a particular activity rate, a particular behavior which is expected based on the historical data of those faults. So the recurrence of a particular magnitude depends completely on the characteristic of those causative faults in a particular location. This is a very detailed and separate topic, which currently might not be under the scope of this general course, which is structural dynamics. So although one of the applications of structural dynamics is the earthquake design or seismic design and seismic analysis, but the applications, they are more general. They may be applicable to wind design, they may be applicable to offshore structures design, high-rise buildings design against any other loadings, then impact design against impact loading, for example. So all of those phenomena where the loading is changing with time, you will be able to apply this theory which you will understand or learn in this course. Earthquake is one of them. So the previous two examples which we covered, they were mostly related to the structural failure. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge was an example where the structural failure occurred because of dynamic instability. The hospital example which I gave, it was a failure where structural failure occurred because of columns being overstressed because of a specific defect or specific issue related to seismic analysis and design. Here in tower structures or in flexible structures like high-rise buildings, cylinder buildings, airport control towers, observatory towers, we have another issue related to structural dynamics, and that is serviceability problem. The structure itself may be safe, but because of excessive vibrations, it may cause human discomfort. So currently we have many high-rise buildings and such towers. For example, Yokohama Marine Tower. Here you can see a very slender, tall structure with different observatory floors at the top. So the mass is mostly concentrated at top, which is supported by a frame. The Sydney Tower, here you can see CN Tower in Canada, and then many high-rise buildings which are very flexible, tower-like buildings. So this is in Bangkok. Here you have in Malaysia in Petronas Tower. So you have many high-rise buildings nowadays or cylinder buildings, and the dynamic wind effects need to be considered for those buildings. You may not simply use the equivalent static approach for these buildings. You may not simply say that, okay, these are few forces, static forces which are representing wind loading, and we just use them for the purpose of structural design for these buildings. You have to simulate the actual dynamics of these buildings for their safe design against dynamic loading, whether it is wind or whether it is earthquake. Some more high-rise buildings. So if you look at the time variation of wind drag force, it will be random obviously. On x-axis you have time, and on y-axis you have the wind force, and it will be random. Sometime it will be in one direction, sometime it come down and changes its direction. So no order in that, completely random. If you look at the response or displacement of a mid-rise building or a low-rise building which have a very high natural frequency is a property of a structure which I will explain in next class. But currently you can just think of it as a property which is related to mass and stiffness of the building. So generally low-rise buildings and mid-rise buildings have a high natural frequency. The opposite or reciprocal of natural frequency is the time period. So the low-rise buildings have a low time period and a high natural frequency. The high-rise buildings, on the other hand, they have a low natural frequency or high time period. So the high-rise buildings have high time period. What actually it is, I will explain in next one or two lectures, but it is just one property just like mass and stiffness of the building. Low-rise buildings or mid-rise buildings have low time period. So if you look at the displacement response of a mid-rise or a low-rise building against this particular dynamic wind loading, you will get a response like this, which is mainly following the same shape as the actual variation of the applied loading. Just few small jumps, or you can say variations, but overall the shape is same. But as you keep on increasing the height of the building, if you look at the displacement response of a high-rise building, you will see that its own dynamics start governing, and now the shape is significantly varied or different from what is applied as an input loading. So the loading is applied in a certain pattern, random pattern, and the structure is not following that pattern, it is following its own dynamics. But low-rise building actually is somehow following the same pattern. So which means that if you are still, the low-rise building or a mid-rise building is somehow behaving like the same loading is applied in a static manner, because the governing equation of motion for static analysis is the applied loading F is equal to the stiffness times the displacement. This is the governing equation of motion for static analysis, which simply says that whatever the variation of force will be, the same variation of displacement will be there, because K is a constant quantity. It represents the stiffness of the structure, and it is a constant quantity for an elastic structure. So if the force is varying with certain pattern, the displacement will be varying with the same pattern. But this is not true when the building is a high-rise building, but it may be somehow true for a low-rise building. So the response of a low-rise building against the random wind force shows that somehow it is still following the same idea. The actual dynamics of the building is still not playing any role, and whatever the when the force comes down, the displacement also comes down. When the force is going up, the displacement also going up. So which means that using designing a low-rise building or a mid-rise building using the same static analysis concept may still be okay. But this concept may not work for a high-rise building which has a significantly different dynamic response for the same applied input loading. So this F is equal to Ku will not work here. F is equal to Ku equation is not sufficient. Something more needs to be added to that equation so that the actual dynamic behavior of the building can be simulated and we should be able to capture that real shaking of the building, which is now not following the actual variation of the applied loading. So therefore, high-rise buildings may have a significantly different response compared to the low-rise building, and therefore their design philosophy, their analysis philosophy should be different. The true dynamic analysis, the rigorous dynamic analysis should be done for such structures against random loadings or time varying loadings. We also have very flexible steel stacks, industrial structures, which are very flexible and they may start vibrating under even normal velocities of wind. Significantly lower velocities of wind which were used for their design, they may start oscillating under those winds also, and they may cause serviceability problems. Here you see very slender steel stacks, and they may be safe alone also, but you still have to have these kind of bracings in order to just reduce their vibrations under normal wind conditions. Otherwise, they may cause serviceability failure. So the information about structural dynamics, the knowledge of structural dynamics is not only required to make structures safe against dynamic loadings, but also to avoid these kind of serviceability failures or serviceability issues. You may require certain special devices sometimes to reduce these vibrations, even when these vibrations are uh, not an issue for structural concern. So you may require special dampers. For example, here in this specific steel tower, a pendulum tuned mass damper was installed at the top in order to suppress the vibration of this cylinder tower structure. So here in these figures you can see a steel ring was applied all around that steel tower in the top, and special devices here which are called viscous dampers, they were used to actually absorb the shaking of these tower structures at the top. They actually used to suppress or decrease the displacement response. They act as shock absorbers, and then they reduce the the horizontal vibrations. So this ring was actually suspended via a wire rope, actually act like a pendulum to actually reduce the vibration from the top. This is just one example, but there are many special devices available which can absorb energy at a particular location in the structure, and they may help in reducing the vibration at that particular location. So this control of vibrations is a whole area which we may also discuss as one chapter in this course. One more example, a pedestrian bridge. This is a very long span bridge. You can see a cable stayed bridge which is a pedestrian bridge here on the right, and the span is very large, and it has a set of pylons here where you have the cables which are stayed there, and then the cable stayed bridge works like that. It is used for the purpose of transportation. I mean, for example, 2000 pedestrians walk across the bridge in the same time. The bridge is subjected to human-induced force in both vertical and horizontal direction as the people pass by that bridge, and because of that it vibrates laterally, and the stay cables also vibrate with very large lateral vibration. The dynamic stresses in those cables is very low. The structure don't have any issue as far as the safety is concerned. So vibration also are very low, their amplitude is low. So there is no difficulty in actually walking that bridge. But still many people are afraid to walk on that because of the vibrations which can be felt by them. So even a bridge is well designed, even it doesn't have any safety concern, it still have what we call as the human perception of vibration. If you can feel a particular vibration, you will never be able to feel safe on that structure. So one purpose for structural analysis or structural dynamics is to make sure that the amplitude of vibration is so less that it may not come under human perception. And most of the times different building codes and different codal requirements ask you to actually keep the vibration amplitude under a certain threshold value, and that threshold value is actually the level of human perception. So they don't allow you to have vibrations even if the structure is safe. They don't allow you to have those vibrations which a human can perceive, and this may result in any issue with the working or with the use of that structure. So this is also one issue other than serviceability, other than safety. This is an issue where you need structural dynamics actually. A static analysis of a particular bridge or any particular structure will never be able to detect this issue and to develop some strategy against or to avoid this issue. So this led us to the course objectives, all of these examples. We know that modern structures are becoming more slender and light. They are becoming more susceptible to dynamic loadings. If you have a very stiff structure, a very massive structure, maybe a wind loading may not be an issue, but it will become an issue if you have a very slender and light structure. On the other hand, if you have a very massive structure, this will still be an issue for earthquake case because earthquake loadings are mass proportional as you have said, as you have seen already. We know that effective earthquake forces, they are mass proportional. For the same ground shaking, ground acceleration, different structures will experience different forces based on their masses. So a lighter structure will be good for better seismic performance compared to a massive structure. But the lighter structure will experience more wind effects if it is taller also compared to a massive structure. So we may have issues about aerodynamic stability of long span bridges, earthquake response of multi-story building, impact of moving vehicles on highway structures, it is also a dynamic loading. All of those issues require structural dynamics. The traditional engineering solutions based on static force, equivalent static forces, and resultingly the static responses, they may not be valid for most of the cases. So we may need to perform the true rigorous dynamic analysis, and therefore we may need to learn structural dynamics for that. So all of those issues or problems which I have just mentioned in last few slides, they may be handled by applying the knowledge of structural analysis. So you must have a basic understanding of dynamic behavior of structures, what are different dynamic phenomena associated with structures, and then you will be able to better design them against these real loadings. So following are these three learning outcomes to develop the basic understanding of principles of structural dynamics. to develop the ability to integrate the principle of structural dynamics in structural design. Obviously, the first topic alone will not be enough until you are able to actually apply those principles into real structural design cases. Obviously, we will not be able to perform dynamic design of a building obviously in this course, but maybe in the next course where we actually focus on earthquake analysis and earthquake design, it will all be dependent on the concepts developed in this course. And then several issues related to dynamic response and behavior of multi-story buildings. The course outlines which we have for this course, it mainly comprises of 6 chapters. Chapter 1 is the dynamics of simple structures. Our approach would be to actually start performing the dynamic analysis for very simple structures and then keep on increasing the complexity of dynamic force. Generally, our approach for static analysis is that since the force is static already in those courses, so we start with a very simple kind of structure, for example, a beam structure, and then some simple kind of support conditions, some simple kind of static loading, and then we keep on increasing the structural complexity. For example, this is step 1, then we go to actual frames, and then we go to the frames which are indeterminate, for example these ones, and then we go directly through the complete 3D structures. In our case, this is the general hierarchy followed for static analysis courses. What we will do in this case in structural dynamics is that we start with a very simple kind of a structure, a very simple single degree of freedom structure, just like this, with very basic assumptions, and then we keep on adding the complexity of applied loading. So we start with very basic push and pull kind of applied loading. Now the force will be the function of time, and the variation of that force may be harmonic, for example, then periodic, then completely arbitrary. So we keep on increasing the complexity of dynamic loading for that simple structure in the first chapter. And once we are done with all kinds of dynamic loadings, the response or dynamic analysis of the simple structure for all kinds of loadings, then we jump to the multi-degree of freedom systems or more complex structures like this. In that case, we may have several levels or several degrees of freedom which are actually uh, representing the complexity of structure itself, and the loadings will be same dynamic loadings f of t, now applied at several levels maybe. So the chapter 2 will be basically multiple degree of freedom structures, the dynamics of multiple degree of freedom structures. So these first 2 chapters are basically the main, you can say, main part of the course, or the starting of structural dynamics actually. Then we will have a chapter about continuous structures. The multiple degree of freedom systems which you will learn in chapter 2, they will be discrete structures where the mass and stiffness is not continuous, but it is concentrated at certain nodes and certain locations. But in chapter 3, we will extend that multiple degree of freedom idea to include continuous structures also, to include those structures which have a continuous stiffness and continuous mass. For example, bars or strings or beams, where the mass is distributed along the length. It is not concentrated at a certain location. We may also have a course, a chapter about earthquake response, but I would like to minimize this chapter because we will discuss this in the next course also. The next course which I will be offering in next semester will primarily focused on the earthquake response. So I would like to minimize the discussion about this chapter here in this course. Then we will have a chapter about random vibrations. Random vibration theory is a separate theory. I mean, whatever we will do up till chapter 3 or chapter 4 will be in the time domain. The force and response will be the function of time. But here in chapter 5, we will learn about another version of structural dynamics, which will be in the frequency domain. And we will understand the response of random vibrations, the random vibration response of different structures, and then the theory of random vibrations will be introduced here. The last chapter will be about the control of dynamic response, the various approaches or various devices or different techniques which are used to control the vibration response. If you want to keep it under a certain limit, if you want to suppress it because of any undesirable phenomena, there you can actually use different techniques and understand different techniques here where you can use to control these dynamic response. So the breakup of all of these chapters is here in the dynamics of simple structure chapter 1. We will have these topics, and these are further subdivided into several videos which are already available on YouTube from the last session which I just taught in the same online mode. So, but this time I will update these topics and I will introduce some new topics also. I will also include some calculations part or numerical part of the course. So this is chapter 1, which is subdivided into all of those topics which are already introduced in last few slides. I'll give you this file so that you can get all these links. Then chapter 2 will be the dynamics of multiple degree of freedom systems, but they will still be discrete. And then third will be dynamics of continuous structures, then random vibrations, then finally control of dynamic response. So many of those topics which were already covered in the last course also, their uh, their video links are available. But as I have said, this time I will change many of these topics. I will change the order also and include or replace different things or different topics in this. These are some reference books. The primary reference material will be my same lecture notes, the slides which I will be actually sharing with you, or the same content in the form of maybe maybe in any other form in the form of class notes or handouts. But they will be the same or will be given by myself. But you can also go through these reference books. They are listed in the same order of relevance. The first three books you can primarily refer, uh, and then you may also go to some other books which are listed here. But if you want to find any relevant topic, most likely it will be available in first three books. The first two are very comprehensive. The third one have it covers some specific aspects, for example, random vibrations or some other topics. These are some more reference books which you may refer. This is a list of different journals and magazines which you may refer in order to have more idea about some of the topics which we discuss here in this course. So I just give you this list and you may check and Google it and then go to their relevant websites and find different papers. Although you may not be able to completely understand some of those things, but it is good to get yourself familiarized with all of these uh, high-end references and journals and magazines where you will find several interesting concepts and things. The evaluation scheme will be the same constant standard evaluation scheme. You will have 1 hour tests in this course, assignments, you may have quizzes and final exam. I will create a course page on these websites. The first one is a more general website which I sometimes update. The second one is my own personal blog, but I think have a course page on both of these websites, and I will send you that link. You can download all those lecture material and this helping material, handouts, everything from those links which I will share maybe in 1 or 2 days. So you can contact me in office 14 at ground floor in PG Wing, Ski Nust. You can email me. This is my email for any question or any issue. So I think let's end this session or this introductory session here. And in the next session, we will start with the first topic related to the dynamics of simple structures, the very first topic of chapter 1 in this course. So I'll see you in the next session.